everyone. I'm Elena Armijo, and I'm the founder of the C-Suite Collective. This is a company I created for executive leadership coaching and wellness that supports C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and founders. Now, more than ever, businesses are running faster and with fewer resources. Burnout, overwhelm, disconnection, and disillusionment are the new norm for teams struggling with an old paradigm. At the C-Suite Collective, we believe deeply that providing massive support for your teams through executive coaching and holistic practices will create an inclusive culture, higher levels of performance, sustainable change, and the organizational impact you desire. You can find us at the c-suitecollective.com. How do we learn to meet people where they're at? We're going to look at that in our coaching tip for the month. And our guest today is Natalie Rothfels, an executive coach and facilitator who partners with co-founders, leadership teams, and new executives to transform how they work together. I loved the conversation with Natalie. She is innovative, creative, hungry, young, really the future of team coaching. So I really hope you enjoy the episode today. Remember, something powerful resides within you, and I'm here to support you in seeing it and creating it. So how do we learn to meet people where they are at? This is a common phrase that I use in coaching with leaders, and sometimes they're like, what does that even mean? It is the idea that we want to go over a bridge to the leader or the person that we're working with and meet them right where they're starting from in a conversation, a breakdown, a conflict, or even just anything that they're trying to grow or develop. Oftentimes, leaders will start with wanting to listen from fixing the problem or solving the problem. And what we want to do is we want to start with curiosity instead of assumption. So instead of starting with, I know what you need, or I have the answer to this question you're asking me, lead with, tell me what matters to you right now. Tell me more about this. Help me understand how I can see your point of view. And this allows you to slow down enough to notice their emotions, their energy, and anything else that can open the door to more connection. And it also creates a foundation of I'm here with you instead of judging you or above you. So that's number one. Start with curiosity instead of assumption. The second thing is honor the capacity of the person, not just the expectation. So leaders typically will have expectations come across as demanding or performative. Like, we need this now. We need it to just be done and quick and fast and easy. And we want to be talking in nuance with the people that we're developing around their capacity inside of expectations. So this looks like, here is the clear expectation I have of this workload or what I expect it to look like when it's done. And I want to walk with you along this journey. So help me understand what your capacity is. Help me understand where you may be experiencing burnout or frustration so that we can slow it down again to listen to each other. And you can tell me more about how that feels or what the experience is like so that we can then create this together, walking forward together. But it is a conversation about capacity instead of just expectation. And then the last one is a big one. It's anchoring every conversation you have in shared humanity and mutual dignity. This is not sharing your own version of pain or frustration or hurt with the leader so that you are the same, but instead really holding their humanity and their dignity as important in part of their development, in part of a team, in part of just the service of connection and moving together side by side. So naming emotions, offering breath, and acknowledging someone's story creates immediate connection, safety, and trust that is starting to be built in micro moments along the way. So start small, go slow, and try these tips out for meeting people where they're at. Natalie, I am so excited to have you on the show. I like to tell guests how I met people or my first impressions of people, and so I'd love to just start there. And you and I recently met at a team coaching certification course, which we'll talk a little bit about, and our shared interest there in groups. But the first thing that struck me when I met you was how incredibly grounded you were in a group setting. Like your energy was just boom. It was like right here, centered, focused, front and center. And it was a magnetic pull to the room for my nervous system to just feel safe. So that was my first experience of you, was like safety, groundedness. And then when I got to know you, like your humor and your charm and your wit and just how incredible of a human you are. So thank you for being here and sharing your voice.
What a sweet way to be introduced. And having not heard any of that before, I feel so warm inside and also a little bashful and yeah, giddy. I didn't know that piece, especially about the energy and the groundedness, because
Yeah,
I I don't know that I necessarily feel that way actually, but it's great to hear that other people feel me as that, regardless of
that's
what
right.
might be going on internally. So that's very sweet, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah. It's so funny. I think oftentimes those of us who feel that way in the world, like we don't feel a way, but then people respond to us in certain ways. It's always so interesting to me what people get from their own nervous systems, right? Like as we're sharing space, which I'm excited to talk to you about. So before we jump in, like tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, how you came about in the coaching and training world, and yeah, let's just start there.
Great. So I'm an executive coach. I mostly work with co-founders and leaders in the startup world. And that's because before I became a coach in earnest, I was a startup operator. I worked for 10, 12 years as a product leader inside of really early stage startups, like kind of Series A, Series B, lots of volatility, lots of uncertainty. And I love building things and making things. So I spent kind of the first decade-ish of my career in the startup space. Before that, though, I was a teacher in a variety of different contexts all around the world, actually. And so
Ah.
I think that was like what I thought I was going to do professionally was teach,
Mm.
particularly in probably like the high school range. I like to banter, and kids that age can kind of like hang in that mode. So I spent some time teaching, but I jumped into tech because my first love was languages and language learning. So I did my degree in linguistics, and that sent me to live in places kind of around the world. And when I was living abroad, I got pinged by a startup that was looking for someone who could help take their startup outside of the US, and particularly to like localize and translate the core product. And so that was like my transition into tech. I knew nothing about tech. I didn't really ever think I wanted to be in tech. I certainly didn't know anything about product, but I guess when you're whatever in your young 20s, you can just be like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's do it. And I remember being thrilled to have a salary and have benefits and to be able to take like a commuter train somewhere. I felt like a big grown up. So
Yeah.
that was kind of like the unknown beginning for me around the kind of environments that I end up working in still today, which are these kind of
Mm.
high paced, high volatility startups trying to build, scale, grow around, usually around the world. So that's a little bit about my background. But I think if I look back to why I'm doing what I do right now, of course, it like starts well before that as a
Mm.
child, because I spend a lot of time now working with co-founders, like I mentioned, groups, particularly around how they are in relationship with each other. And
Hmm.
that stems from my childhood and the role that I play in my family. And so we can talk
Ah.
about that. But it's sort of, I find introductions kind of interesting in that what I'm doing right now seems like looking back, like very nonlinear, but then looking
Mm.
back seems very, oh yeah, that makes some sense.
That's so great. It's such a great lead in because, whatever you want to share about your background and your family, I'd love to hear that. And I'm present to it as coaches in the world. We often say that we become warriors for something, that is born from our wounds or our childhood or something that we experienced ourselves or even made up in our heads ourselves. I oftentimes think of my own family and the stories I made up around what was going on, which may or may not have been true. If we ask my parents, they might have a different version of that. And yet it doesn't actually matter, right? Like it's what became the thing that I became an advocate for. So, is there anything you want to share about that piece?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up the youngest child in my mom's side of four kids, and my parents had they got divorced when I was like about 8. And so there's, first of all, just a lot of energy with that many people in a living situation. So even if they hadn't been divorced, it would have been still its own level of chaos, just like numbers of people. And then adding on
Yeah.
to that, like we had like, I'm not even going to name the actual number of animals that we had in the house. So it was just like
Oh
kind of
my
like a
goodness.
menagerie of feelings and nervous systems at all times.
All trying to
And
co-regulate together.
exactly, or all dysregulating together.
Ah, okay, there we go.
And I think that it's a little hard to know, right? Nature, nurture, but I think I was quite sensitive to those dynamics at all periods of
Mm,
time growing up, either because that was just who I was or because that environment really like had me paying attention a lot to who was where, what were they saying, how are they relating to each other, where were they missing each other, what was unspoken was also a big thing in my family system. And so
mm,
I think I ended up refining or like just getting stronger and stronger at noticing what was going on in the room. Maybe to an extent that I developed some hypervigilance that I'm now kind of trying to unlearn. But I
mm,
think the strength of that is that I really can sense when I walk into a room, like what is the energetic undertone of what's going on. And I can also sort of sense like, oh, here's the roles that people are like slotting into that might not be obvious or overt to other people until they're named. And so I think I particularly with my parents' divorce became quite sensitive to the ways in which people, one, aren't communicating, two, are
hmm
communicating, but in maybe in not very effective ways, but three, how I was maybe in between that communication. And when
mm,
I think now about working with co-founders, let's say there's two of them, I'm really aware of like what happens inside of me when I see people not communicating at all or not
hmm
communicating effectively and how that might impact, my ability to stay present, what I see, what I don't see. So it's both a bit of a struggle and a bit of a strength as it usually is. My
hmm
sort of attunement to where there's conflict, where there's rupture, where there's misunderstanding, where there's fear, where there's pain that people are carrying
mm,
that they're bringing into conversation with each other. So I think that's part of the influence of my childhood is sort of being in the middle of my
mm,
family system and particularly my parents in their divorce. And I also think that the other thing I got from that childhood experience was, I mean, you mentioned like my humor and first meeting me as sort of like this
yeah.
is all ridiculous. Like all of this chaos, all of this, I don't even know. It's just like kind of silly, and we just need to kind of like laugh about it. And I started to develop kind of a maybe a impulse that like humor is actually a way that a lot of people can connect around. And so
Mm,
where there was rupture, I think humor often brought more connection into my family system, maybe sometimes
mm,
in a self-deprecating way. But I also think that some of my, ways of being in the world on that front come from trying to find as a child ways to connect as opposed to be separate from each other if we weren't going to be able to do it, as a single family unit or verbally, so to speak.
hmm Well, and connection again. Man, you just said a lot of gold, Natalie. So for everybody listening, pick through it very carefully because there's so much gold in there. And the two pieces that I'm picking up on, number one, specifically around humor as one method of connection, how there can always be a double side, right? Like there can be a dysfunctional side of it to get through, but there's also on the other side a connection point of resilience and joy. And man, some of the most joyful people I've met in the world have been through some really hard things, right? And can access those levels of emotion on both ends of the scale. So I really hear that that's also can be a superpower for you. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. The second thing that I'm curious about is you've mentioned a lot around energetics of a room and group dynamics. This is why I was very excited to have you on the show today is because I firmly believe that the the next wave of the 10 to 20 years of coaching in the coaching industry is going to be about teams and groups. I think we're seeing a lot of things move in that direction. I think the world is craving this in a way that you've probably been in this world for a very, very long time, as you've said, working co-founders. So when you talk about the energetics of a room, or even when somebody comes to you to work with you, they probably don't know what any of this means. So how would you start a conversation with people that are looking for this work and they know that they need help? They know that something is dysfunctional in their partnerships or their teams or their groups. And what would you, not only what questions you would ask, but what would you reflect to them if they don't even know what the undertones mean? Like some people don't
Mhm.
even know what that entails, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would start very slowly. I think that when I'm talking with another coach like you or somebody who's also sensitive to energetic things, it's easy to just kind of like drop into that language. And like I sort of see you nodding
Yeah.
and I've been in spaces with you before. So I'm like, okay, yeah, Elena like knows what I mean.
Yeah.
And like I don't need to describe it. But like I would never start speaking another language to somebody hoping that they can understand what I'm saying when I know that they don't speak that language yet. So I think the first part is like, what language do they speak is important. And I think I
Awesome.
try to empathize, come to a place of, I'm going to assume that I'm visiting them in their home turf and home country and native language, first of all, and that I am not here to like speak another language that they're so supposed to suddenly just understand. I think that's very intimidating to be confronted by someone who's purportedly supposed to help you and is actually like speaking a language you don't understand. So that's like step one is
Yeah.
like, where
Yeah.
are they? And so I try to not actually use any of this language at all and to do a translation process inside myself when I'm first interacting with somebody about how my body feels when I'm interacting with them, rather than saying, how are you feeling over there right out the gate, which can be intimidating. Most of the people that I work with, I would say, are like quite head oriented. They're maybe not even aware that they have a body. I mean, they know they have limbs and things, but when I ask them to go into their body, that would make no sense. It would be confusing. Same thing, even with like their heart or their emotions or their feelings. So I try to sort
Hmm.
of just start by seeing where they go. Do they stay in their
Mm.
head? Are they aware of their body? Are they aware of their heart? Do they speak about feelings? Do they not speak about feelings? How fast are they speaking? How slowly do they speak? When I'm
Mm.
listening to them talk, what's happening for me and my body? How rushed do I feel? How forward do I feel? How backward am I leaning? Do I feel so I'm kind of just like almost like having a bunch of radars that all kind of are attuned to different bits of information in the atmosphere. And first I'm just like seeing what those radars read. But I'm not
Mm.
necessarily verbalizing the read of those radars to the people right out the gate because they're probably going to go right over their head. So I think those are
Mhm.
two starting points. Like I'm going to just try to speak their language out the gate. And then I'm also going to start to collect data about
Mm.
what are my radars saying,
Mhm.
knowing my radars are, filtered with my biases. They're not truth. They're not the ultimate answer, but they're data. And then
Mm.
gradually, as I'm starting to work with individuals, but also, pairs and teams, I'm starting to see what data they start to notice and like kind of titrate a little bit, like the types of questions I might be asking or observations I might be making to increase their awareness of the data that I might be sensing for myself. Knowing I also only have some of the data, like they have data I don't have. And kind of over
Mhm.
time, our work is to like create more shared data collectively.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for walking through the process, not only for practitioners, coaches, people, facilitators out there that are working with clients, because you can hear the beautiful technique that you have, but also for the people looking for the work, right? Because sometimes seeing behind the curtain a little bit, they're like, how does this even work? And do I want to have a conversation? So I really hear that you create a sense of safety for them in their homeland. I love that analogy of like going to different places in the world and speaking different languages and meeting people where they're at, as opposed to you being the one that brings people towards you. That's so beautifully said, from safety. And then the second piece, just really creating awareness with them, walking with them, as opposed to at them or telling them how or any other version of that. what's the difference between a tea group? Like maybe we can talk about tea groups a little bit. Some people don't even know what that is. So what is a tea group? Why do you love them? What's the value that you see there in the world of tea groups?
Yeah, so I facilitate tea groups as part of Stanford's business school's class. They have an elective called interpersonal dynamics, and the methodology of tea groups is pretty old school at this point. And it's the general premise is that some number of people, in the case at Stanford, there's 12 students who are gathering in a circle together and two co-facilitators. And the methodology is very here and now. And students are trying to learn how to build relationships with other people in the room, not based off of some theoretical concepts of like follow steps A, B, C, and D, and then you will be able to build relationships, but actually by setting a goal for themselves about something they want to learn and then trying those practices out in real time in the group and then
Mm,
getting feedback from others in the group about what they tried. It's kind of enforces a learning cycle where you identify something you want to try, you try it, then you get feedback on it, you reflect on it, and then you try something else like over and over and over again. And what's
mm,
special about them, in my opinion, I mean, one thing, there's many things that are really impactful, but one thing that's special is that when you get 12, or in this case, 14 with two co-facilitators, 14 people together in a room who are all committed to this learning cycle, but all working on different goals, something kind of magical happens. So let's say, Elena, your goal is to work on trusting people more right out the gate, not assuming that people are untrustworthy, but just trusting them. And you might try
mm,
to practice that behaviorally by rather than meeting someone, what someone says with what's wrong about it, you might actually try to practice by meeting them with, hey, here's what I really appreciated about what you said. Or
mm,
here's what helped me to feel more trusting towards you based off of what you just did in the group. So you might be practicing that.
mm, mm,
I might be practicing something completely different. I might be practicing working on being more assertive about my needs. And so I might behaviorally be trying when I feel like someone does something in the group that doesn't work for me. Maybe I'm trying to get brave enough to step forward and say, you know what, Elena, like what you said to me doesn't feel very good to me. And here's how it
mm,
lands for me and my body. I feel misunderstood and frustrated. And so, where you might be trying to meet me with trust, I might be trying to meet you with practicing more assertiveness about my needs. And when you get a lot of people doing that, some interesting things can happen. And with enough safety and support in the group and the right pacing, people end up
mm,
learning like an incredible amount, both about themselves, but also about others. And particularly, I think about others who are different than they are. And I think in this world, our ability to learn how to connect across differences rather than connect just with people who are like us is of utmost importance right now. So
mm,
that's one of the reasons I really like being part of the circles. It's a practice for me, like in my own values, to show up and say, the thing I'm working on is connecting with people who are all different than I am. And like as a
mm.
baseline, I don't find that there's that many state places or spaces for us to intentionally go practice that these days.
Yeah. So beautifully said. Thanks for the call out to the world as well. Like I really hear how it ties up to your purpose and what you see for the world. Like me too. Like what's possible. And I'm wondering how do we, and I'm looking at this both as a founder myself and developing a company, but also as a coach is how do we incorporate some of those learnings in real time with teams that do exist or groups that do exist that say, oftentimes we have organizations that will come to us and say, we want to work on rebuilding trust as this team. We need to trust each other. We need to be an actual team. We need to work and move as a team. And we want to honor each other's differences, right? Like those are kind of the baseline starting points for working with us. And what are some of the crossovers that you can see from T groups to that work that would support some of those initiatives in the world for
Yeah.
organizations?
Trust is like such a big, small, empty word that means a lot, right? So I think the first piece is understanding, coming back to that native language piece, what does trust mean to the people in the room? And what
Mm,
are the behaviors for maybe each member in the room that engender trust and that break down trust, because
Mm.
that might be very different for each of them and very different based off of their cultural upbringings and backgrounds. So, for example, it might be very trust engendering for me to hear someone speak quite directly about their feelings, whether they're
Hmm.
positive or negative, because then I don't have to guess what's actually going on for them. For someone
Mm.
else, it might be very trust breaking to hear someone speak about their feelings because it then might make it hard to save face in the group. Like, are we just going to rat anyone out for doing something that someone finds not tasteful or upsetting to them? Are we going to spend most of our time actually talking about negative things rather than positive things? That doesn't feel safe to me. And so I might start by thinking about what is the specificity of what are the things that actually create trust for each person. And more often than not, and I say this for myself as well, people do not know. People know when they feel repelled by people or they're drawn to people, but it's very hard for people to get down to the behavioral specifics of what are people doing that creates that.
Mm.
And part
Hmm.
of that, I think, is because it's much easier for us to project things onto other people than to kind of do the U-turn and say, what did they do behaviorally that didn't work for me? And what does that say about me and my
Hmm.
needs and who I am and what I care about? So it's kind of, I'm going to say lazy with some quotes to kind of just say they are not trustworthy rather
Yep.
than I feel mistrusting when they did
Mm.
X without labeling the other person in that way. So there's a couple pieces there I've named. One, what is trust building? What's trust breaking? The other is what's going on for me when I see someone do something rather than who do I think that person is, like an attribution of somebody rather than a ownership of impact on you. That's a big one that can work for teams. So when I see people kind of making attributions and about other people, there's usually a story that they've come up with about that rather than really being clear about what's actually happening for them that has them go to the story and therefore to the attribution. So that's
Hmm.
another crossover. I think that happens a lot. And then the third that I'll name, and I could keep rambling here, is the sort of developmental cycles of teams I see a lot in the T group context. So Tuckman's sort of famous model of forming and then storming and then norming and performing and then adjourning, I guess, is another that people add. And then the kind of loop that goes in and out of all of those at all times happens on teams too. And so in a T group, when the T group forms, nobody knows each other. And over the course of, in the case of the class that I facilitate, 9, 10 weeks-ish, by the end of it, many of those groups are what I would consider higher performing teams or groups than most teams
Mm.
I work with at any organization, any formal
Oh,
organization.
cool. Yeah.
And you would maybe look from the outside and say, nothing is even happening. They're literally just sitting in a room talking. There's no work product, there's no outcomes that have been created from it. And yet they often end up in a really high performing, highly connected team state because they have effectively gone through the process of forming and storming and norming. And then they get to this sort of performance state. And then by the time they have to adjourn at the end of the class, everyone's like, no, I wish it would keep going,
Mm.
right? And for organizations, what I see is really kind of halted or cut off, truncated parts of that developmental cycle
Mm.
where maybe they form and then they're expected right out the gate to perform, but
Yes.
the environment isn't such or the internal leadership to the team isn't such yet that they can actually go through the stages. It would effectively be like saying, I have a toddler, but I expect them to know how to drive. And then we're surprised when they get into an accident. And I see that happen a lot with teams as well, that there's just truncated processes. And it's a bit of a slow down to speed up thing. Like it
Hmm.
does look like it takes longer, but it actually gets you there way faster and in a more sustained way if you can go through the development process more
I love that.
sustainably.
Well, and then it's also a repeatable process, right? Because then I'm thinking for all the teams that say, okay, we just got done storming and we formed and we stormed and we're getting to norming and oh, now we're adding somebody new on the team.
Yeah,
Right?
repeat.
Repeat. Yeah. And I
Totally.
think that's where a lot of leaders get frustrated, right? Of the repeat of the process. But as you're saying, it's slowing down to go faster in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you only have to look outside of the context of organizations to get examples of this that are really
Mm.
clear. Like go to a dinner party where half of the people already know each other really well and half the people don't. And even for the people who know each other really well, it can feel like awkward because you can sense that there's sort of limbs to the body that are not yet attached to the core.
Mm. Hmm.
And it just feels different. And it takes time to actually build as a different type of group. And I think that's
Hmm.
scary. I think it's scary for people to then be like, oh man, have we gone backwards? Or like, oh, this isn't as comfortable as it was when we were more cohesive. And it's like, yeah, that's true. It
Yeah.
isn't.
Honoring that, right? And being transparent about that. And also, I'm thinking about all these high performers on a team, right? When you've got a bunch of high performers on a team that want to go fast or get frustrated by not being able to do the high performance thing, whatever that is, how that also enters the energetics in the room
Mhm.
and then what that causes in themselves. It's all really fascinating. I think the the opportunity to learn how to be with differences and things in a room really support business. Can you speak on that a little bit? Like, what are some of the outcomes you've seen for some of the teams you've worked with who have been successful at this, or even just business in general? What have you seen transform and change through people that are willing to take on this work?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm a little bit less connected to the like here's the bottom line revenue impact that people have now been able to have as a result of the, work that we
Sure.
did 6 months ago, and I think that's like an intentional distancing from myself because I think
Mm.
that if we go too fast to what is the bottom line impact on revenue, we
Mhm.
actually miss out on all of the unknown things that can happen in the process that are much less linear than how does
Mm.
dot 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 logically lead up to revenue. So I'm actually not going to talk about revenue, even though I know for many of the organizations I work with, when they feel more high functioning, it has that lagging
Effect. Yeah.
effect, right?
Yeah.
I think that outcomes that I feel more excited about, and I think the people I work with feel more excited about, are much more about the feeling of how it is to do the work.
Mm.
And I think that shows up as it looks more sustainable for people. They
Hmm.
are not burning out as much. They feel
Yep.
like they can be more of who they are or want to be in a work setting. They don't feel like they have to actually exile huge parts of themselves in order to be effective in the workplace.
Hmm.
They're willing and able to see possibilities rather than lack of possibility, or sort of more scarcity. So that could be possibility of, hey, something doesn't feel right between us, Elena. Like rather than me just assuming it's never going to work, I'm going to see it as an opportunity to get more curious about what's going on between us. So,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
orientation away from scarcity towards opportunity and towards possibility. I think there's also a outcome that is very subtle, which is what are the things that aren't spoken versus are now spoken,
Mm.
and a decrease in the unspoken stuff and an increase in the spoken stuff. And for many people, things being on the table is much easier to then look at together rather than to
Mm.
guess around.
Hmm.
So those are just like I can think of tens of examples in each of those categories of people I've worked with where there have been increases in all those factors, and they really result in a kind of feeling more than just a revenue number or a bottom line number. The last one I want to say, though, that I think is really critical to the revenue piece is when you add up all those aforementioned outcomes, you end up getting more resilience. And I think in the context that I work with folks in, which are really early stage, highly volatile, really unpredictable circumstances where they might not be a business next year, resilience is effectively like saying, can we come to bat again and try something new when
Hmm.
we are hitting a wall? And that has to have some revenue impact at the end of the day, because if you give up, you certainly aren't going to see sort of business outcomes at the end of it. And so that piece I
Sure.
think is quite important. Like, am I willing to get hit and get up again, fall and get up again, be in conflict and get up again and repair? And I just see more and more resilience and capacity to do that over time.
Well, and in my work with, I work with startups, but a lot of startups actually, but also a lot of companies that have been around for a while. They're not necessarily institutionalized or, Fortune 500 companies. I'm not speaking about those, but I am speaking about the ones that are sustainable. They've been around for 5 to 10 years. They're making good revenue. They've got a bigger team. And in that arena, the work that, what I'm present to from the work you're doing, if we look at the next stage of that and the work that I see in the world, people that take this on, there's legacy conversations start to emerge in leadership, and not just legacy for the company, but legacy for the people. Like the leadership skills that are being developed in these early stages, in your arena, serve them forever, for the rest of their life, wherever they go, whatever companies they're a part of, whoever they develop, and their families, right? The way that they're leading their children's development even. So it's really beautiful to just see the whole, like all of the gifts along somebody's life, and the journey that can be accomplished through even just working one time with a tough scenario, and really slowing down to focus on what it feels like to create connection and all of the beautiful ROI you mentioned. Very
Yeah.
cool.
I really believe that the sort of storyline of the person or couple people who are in charge of an organization, just, and I mean storyline like internal system, how their role was in their family, their anxieties, their strengths, their passions, their joys, their all the thing will just, it just cascades all the way down into the organization. And so the organization ends up becoming a bit of like a mirror, reflection, or a ripple out of the core psyche, let's call it, of
Yeah.
whoever is leading it. And there's a lot of beauty to that. And there's a lot of like, excuse my language, oh shit to that. Because until you try that on for size, most of what you're doing as a leader is going to be unconsciously projecting your stuff onto other people and then saying, why aren't they good enough for me?
Mm.
And until you're willing to say, wait a second, what is my relationship to being in a position of power? How do
Mhm.
I relate to other people who are in power? What are my beliefs about conflict? What is my role when I'm not sure what to do? How do I navigate uncertainty? Who am I when I need help? Like
Mhm.
all these sort of things that are bound to come up when you're leading an organization, or just even being a leader within an organization,
Mhm.
have a lot of impact on everyone below you. And until you're sort of brave enough to look at that stuff, it will just have its unconscious impact on the people below you. And so you're talking about legacy. I think that's an heirloom, nice way of saying it. The other is, the intergenerational or inter like hierarchical traumas that you might, small and large, bring onto
100%.
other people, right? And so
100%.
I really respect when leaders come to coaching work thinking about like, okay, I actually have a responsibility here. It's not just I want to
Mm.
grow and get my company to the next stage of growth. It's like I actually have a responsibility to people.
Mhm.
And I want to take that responsibility seriously because it will have impact that I'm not ever going to totally even know how far it extends unless I am willing to look at that.
That is a word. That's it. That's it. That's the responsibility piece of leading people, right? And owning that fully.
And I think at least I grew up in California, in Northern California. I'm white. I grew up in a relatively individualistic culture and mostly around other people who are similar from an individualism standpoint. And I kind of got the that script inside of me, and I know so many people who have. And so I literally had no training
Mm.
for being responsible for other people, right? And I didn't necessarily look up to my parents or other people I knew in my community who are like, that's the kind of leadership that I want to embody, right? So I didn't also have like kind of these paragon models that I look up to. And so in the absence of any exposure or any training of that, then it is a deep, deep responsibility, in my opinion, to then look inside and say, huh, given I have no exposure and no training, I guess I should probably take responsibility for how I might impact other people if I am leading.
Yeah, well said. I hear the work you've done, but also just the the lean again towards groups and teams. Like if we're going to be with people in the world collectively, what do we create? And how does that ripple effect create the future? Yeah.
Mhm.
So well said. Well, man, Natalie, I could talk to you for hours about anything. You are so well spoken, but not well spoken in the old traditional sense, in the deep connection to your soul and the way that you've thought about your purpose and what you believe in the world. So deep, deep gratitude to you for the work you're doing in the world and who you're impacting. I always like to ask the last question on the way out. If there was, a headline, a billboard, a megaphone that you had that you wanted to send the world off into, what would the headline be for this next year?
Oof. I don't know why this came to me just now. I haven't thought of it, but usually when that happens, I should just run with it. You know, that phrase, like, do the work. What just came to me was like crossing out the do and putting, but still having it there visually and having it say, be the work.
Mm,
And I think that that probably means to me, like, embody a way that you want to show up that's aligned with what you care about, what you value, but also, like you said in my intro, like how you want others to feel around you.
mm.
And that it's not just about action, 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 next thing, next thing, next thing. That's the doing the work part, but more about receiving and holding and embodying the work that I want to see in the world.
The wave of the future. Thanks for being it. Thank you for being here and sharing all your gifts and your beautiful wisdom on the show. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Good to chat with
If
you.
this conversation sparked something for you, let it move through your week. Take it with you, take on one small action to move the ball forward. And if you want to join our community of leaders who are daring to lead with courage and heart, you can find that at www.elenaarmijo.com or www.the-sweetcollective.com. I reserve a small number of complimentary 20-minute sessions for leaders who want clarity on what they need and insight into what is getting in the way. The practical next steps that create real movement and results in your leadership journey. So you can schedule a call through the link below. It's in the description. Like, subscribe. Thank you for listening, for showing up, and for doing the work of being human together.